This episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. The Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard. And you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is... Fuck, man, it is one of my bucket list guests. When I started this show, I had the assumption that I, set goals in front of myself and I wanted to have certain people on. And John Corabi was one of them. I have this kind of interesting fascination with people who existed at a time before really the internet existed in any capacity, and to a degree sort of disappearing. I'm not saying John has not disappeared. He has had a very successful career that he has carved out for himself, being the guitar player of Rat, doing a band with Bruce Kulick from X-Kiss. Dude has done so much shit. But it's one of those where everyone's just like, oh, he's the former singer of Motley Crue for one fucking record. And he has done so much more. And, he recently put out a book called Horseshoes And Hand Grenades. And when I had gotten on the Rare Bird email blast, I had gotten something about how he had signed with them to write a new autobiography. And I had reached out to the person because I had almost assumed that it had been written at that point, not that it still needed to be tweaked or whatever. So I've kind of been waiting 7-8 months to do this chat. And was one where, I think I got the book in a PDF form, and it's about 500 pages. And I think I blew through it in about a day and a half. And that's with taking some breaks, working at the bar. I was trying to read it while I was working at the bar. But it is a great book. It is so hard to put down. It's one of the few books autobiographies, I should say, that's written from a perspective of sounding like the person. It doesn't come across like you're reading a book and someone wrote all these stories for someone or a diary or whatever. And it just feels like someone telling you these stories, and they happen to be mostly in a chronological order. And it's just fucking wild to literally read and hear the life that John has had pre-Motley Crue, everything that led up to him getting into Motley, what happened as a result of him, the time in Motley. I even learned a little bit, I didn't realize that he was still working in some capacity with the band as a secondary guitar player, or, spoilers, potentially as the main guitar player on the record for Generation Swine, the first record back with Vince Neil. But that record has always, that Motley record with Corabi has always been one to me where, as a young kid, it was one of the first kind of Motley records that was I remember being old enough to remember it. I remember the excitement about it because, I grew up on MTV. My dad and my parents were big on Motley Crue. So it was one of those where it was the first time I kind of had a cognitive awareness of this new music coming out. And I remember, seeing, the video for Hooligan's Holiday and just being like, shit. Wow. All right. That sounds different. It sounds, I don't know. And it just sounded different. It sounded important. It sounded grown up. And I don't know how to say it any other way than that. And even, 20 some odd, 30 some odd years later for me, I still really don't know how to describe it. It's almost akin to the transition from Van Halen with David Lee Roth to Van Halen with Sammy Hagar. If you look at Van Halen with Dave, it's fun. It's got great riffs. It's just fun. That's all it is. It's like party music. There's nothing really of substance to it. But then you had Sammy join the band, and now all of a sudden, like, songs, like, there was still that playful nature that, Sammy and the guys had, but it was more serious. It felt like people who knew how to write songs. It felt like this is real songwriting for real songs that have a real message and real meaning. And I feel like it elevated the band to a lot of people who just assumed they were only this one thing. And I feel like John's time in Motley did the same thing. However brief it was, I feel like it was one of those where that one record did so much to change the perception of who Motley was, from being a fun party band to being a band of really talented musicians who could write fucking good songs. And I know it's not really the narrative anymore. I know a lot of people love that record and say that it's probably arguably one of the best. And I would agree with that. I think it still sounds great, like most Bob Rock records do. But I think for me, it's always been just because of how diverse the songs were and are, the lyrical concepts, a song like Uncle Jack, just shit like that didn't exist back then. It just sounded cool. It sounded different. It sounded, like I said, grown up. And at a time when you're, 10, 11 or so, that's all you want to be. You want to be with all the grown-ups. You want to be considered a grown-up. So I'm going to stop blabbing, but I think obviously you can sense my love of John's career and just getting to sit down for a minute, more than a minute, getting to sit down with him for a little while and pick his brain and talk to him. This is a bucket list guest for me. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with John Corabi, and I'll talk to you all on the other side of it. Gotta say, and I hit record because this is just kind of a conversation, not really like a interview per se. But I gotta say, this is probably one of the easiest books I've read for an autobiography. It felt like I couldn't put it down, but more importantly, it felt like a conversation that just happened to be transcribed. And I haven't really found that since kind of band bios and so forth are kind of my like go-to for reading material, just because I find the stories so interesting. But it didn't feel like, it felt like you wrote it, even though I know you had someone sitting down with you and interviewing you and so forth. But I just wanted to commend you on that, because it's not like a book I've read in the 20 some odd years or so that I've been reading books like this.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, you know what, dude? Like, honestly, I had started, this whole thing came about, God, probably 20 years ago. As a joke, I was going through my second divorce, and my manager at the time, I had two managers, a guy named John Greenberg, who I still have, and then another gentleman named Tim Heine. And I was in Tim's office, and I was going through a divorce, and I was telling him everything that had happened. And he was laughing. He's like, "Crab, man, you got to write an autobiography." He goes, like, some of the shit that's happened to you is just ridiculous. And to be honest with you, I had started working on it. We started working on the book, and then I got like a little bit of it, and I wasn't real pleased with it. Then I started working on it with another writer friend, and let's face it, like, I could have probably sat down and done this myself, but again, I'm not, although I've been doing lyrics my whole life, I'm not real good with book formats and like the whole process. So I sat down with some other people that had written books, and I tried it the first time. I wasn't real pleased. I tried it the second time, and the guy was really good, but it was very wordy and really super intelligent. Do you know what I mean?
I 100% know what you mean.
Yeah, some of the analogies he was using, I'm like, God, like, I don't speak like that. I don't talk like that. So I kind of put it to bed. And then honestly, even when Paul approached me about doing a book, I didn't really want to do it because God, no disrespect to anybody, but everybody's written a fucking book. Like, and it's gotten to the point now where it's like, initially it was like the band guys. And, it's so like a band will do a book collectively and then they'll do one individually. And then it's trickling down. And I just saw one not that long ago, like some roadies from Kiss in the 70s got together and wrote a book. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, the roadies are writing them now. So I just kind of felt like I was jumping on a bandwagon. But that was the thing when I sat with Paul. I told him it has to sound like me. It has to come across like I'm telling the story. And then the thing that did help was, Paul kind of conducted everything in an interview format, wrote everything down, kind of put it in a book form. Then he sent it to me, and I went through literally word for word and corrected what I thought didn't sound like me. And then I would send it back, and then he'd re-edit it and add or take away things. And then we literally went back and forth 8 or 10 times. And, even with this process, I found myself taking like, as an American, we say the word like while, like I'm trying to find an example. like if I say, well, while I was waiting for the bus,
yeah,
I was da-da-da-da. Well, he uses the word wilts, W-I-L-S-T, because he's English.
mm-hmm.
So I had to go in there and I'm like, where he uses the word. We got one actually got through. There's a photo of me and my mother in the book, and he's like, he wrote me and mum, M-U-M, and I don't say that, and I didn't catch it until the book was printed. But it was funny. Like I would just sit there and go, bro, all right, F you with your English language. Like seriously, this is how I talk. You know what I mean? But we got it, and I'm really pleased with it. Everybody that's read it so far has actually said the same thing, that it was a really easy read, which it should be. It's a coloring book.
Well, your life then is very colorful. I mean, it's kind of funny because, like, being from the East Coast myself, originally in Delaware, it was kind of funny, and I feel like it'll kind of trip some people up. Maybe when you talk about extended family, and I was reminded of this the other day when I was looking at something, and someone's like, "What the fuck is a pop?" And I'm like, "It's your grandparent." Or a mum, or things like that. And it's still funny that we have regional dialect so different, even just like, because I live here in Michigan now and have most of my life, but it's just funny that East Coast side of me just never will fucking leave. So like, I'll pick up on some of the cadences so fucking fast. So like when you were talking about the cold winters and being in Philly and things like that, I was like, yep.
Yeah, and it's funny, like if you go, I mean, even in the state of Pennsylvania, if you talk to someone in Philadelphia, and someone is conversing with a group of people, they say, how are yous?
Yeah.
Yous guys. How you guys
Yep.
doing? And then you go to Pittsburgh, same state, other side of the state, it's yins. How are yins doing?
I don't think I've noticed that one.
Yeah, it's weird. Go to Pittsburgh. It's how are yins doing? And it's the whole thing with, in Philly, we said soda. Pretty much everywhere else, it's pop.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know. It's funny, but I guess my biggest concern was that it sounded like me, and I don't have a story. Like, if you really look at a lot of these um, autobiographies, they kind of read like one of those VH1 behind the scenes kind of thing, and it's like, band gets together, a bunch of high school friends, they get together, they play, they get a record deal, they become famous, they start doing drugs and crazy behavior, they break up, they're away from each other for 5 years, and they get back together, they get sober, and they're bigger, better, faster than they ever were before. And I'm like, my story doesn't read like that. So I was kind of concerned that I wasn't sure if it was boring or not, because there is no crazy, like me anyway. It's not like, there's no stories about me doing so many drugs that I woke up naked in an airport bathroom or anything like that. You know what I mean? But I was just concerned about it being boring in terms of some of the other autobiographies that I've read.
Well, I think something that you guys did in the book that I thought was really advantageous to kind of creating a really immersive experience between just the nature of reading, but then kind of adding a visual, because I got the PDF of the book for a media link, so I didn't get to see any of the photos that are attached to the book.
Okay.
But what I love that you did is, and I've never seen someone do this, and in the day and age that we live in, it would make it such an immersive experience for everyone to do this, was when you'd be like, for example, talking about when you were at that show and Vince Neil was headlining and you're talking to your friend and then get pulled up and you're like, and you can see this on YouTube. And that's exactly what I fucking did. I went and looked it out on YouTube to see more of what you're talking about. So I not only have what your account of it and kind of stopped, but then I could see visually what had happened and all that, and then go back to the book. And I thought that was such a clever use of having an extra resource available that everyone has access to. And I'm surprised more people don't do that. And you did that throughout, and even talking about songs that you were into or songs that you would play, like, oh, you can go back and listen to this, or you can hear this point, like time-stamped at this point. And I was kind of surprised to not see that be done in anything, especially given the fact that most of the books that I read or in this medium, like musicians or entertainers or whatever, have all of that information at their disposal where they could do something like that.
Yeah, well, and again, like, there's it's kind of obvious, I have some fans come up to me all the time that saw that video or whatever, and so we're like, let's reference all this shit. You know what I mean? There's videos. I think we mentioned some of the videos that we were during rehearsals, and it's like, I'm describing it. Why wouldn't we use some sort of a visual aid? It's out there. It's free to use. So, like, here you go. Like, you can find it. You can find what I'm talking about on YouTube right now. You know what I mean? So, and again, a lot of that, Paul having written a few books, and also Paul is, I got to give him credit, because, he started this whole thing with, I don't know if you know Paul's background, but he started a website called Chronological Crew back in '95, I think, when I was in Motley, and his favorite band was Motley Crue. So he started this website, and I swear to God, dude, he knows shit about Motley that we all forgot. You know what I mean? But he's done the research, so much so to the point that when they did the Dirt, they actually asked him to kind of go through it and make sure that all the timelines and everything were correct. And then he actually even helped with the movie.
Mm.
So he's like really good with researching, um, you know, and a lot of the stuff, like even some of the videos that are out there, I didn't even know they were there. He's like, yeah, there's video, and he'd send me the link. And so again, I have to kind of credit him for actually hunting this shit down. Even with me, like he, I remember when we were talking about when I was born. Um, he was like, "Do you remember what day you were born?" And I go, "Man, I want to say I think it was a Sunday." Okay, well, and he did something and found out April 26th in 1959 was a Sunday. Um, but then he like he found some old transcripts from the first guy that started working on a book with me.
Hmm.
And that guy had interviewed like my ex-wife, he had interviewed my dad, and my dad told him like, "Oh yeah, John was born at 11:01 on Sunday evening on, you know, blah blah blah." So Paul did all the research. He's great with that stuff, you know what I mean? He really came through in spades on this.
It's kind of funny because like even going back through sometimes, and I don't mean this may sound kind of not a nice thing to say, but I mean it totally not to be. But sometimes I forget how old you actually are because when reading the book, you're like, oh, some of the things feel like you're happening now, and you're like, and that was 2001. I'm like, holy fuck, we're not even. We still got 20 some odd years to go to get to now. But it was weird because like I think that's the thing that separates a lot of your book and I guess Paul as well, and how you approach this was that it never felt like, even when you're talking about your childhood, obviously I know that that's, you know, many decades ago, but it still felt like when you're telling it, it felt like it was happening now, like it wasn't that far along. And I think that's something that a lot of people, I don't know if it's because they are like don't care about where they like don't think anyone cares about where they grew up or their history or whatever, or think it's so old no one cares. But it's almost like it almost seemed like you guys found a way to kind of tell the stories that would then set up. It's almost like great storytelling as a whole. Like, okay, we're gonna give you this piece, like, you know, you're talking about your uncle, and you know, start talking about the story, and then it kind of goes away, it's kind of on the back burner, it's almost like a B story or a B plot, and then you bring it back for like the A plot and you're like, holy shit, like now, like it's crazy the payoffs you kind of do with that in mind. And I don't know if that was more of a Paul thing, or, you know, like you had said, where you're kind of going back and forth, where if that was kind of something you wanted to do, where it's like, we're going to kind of introduce this story, kind of put a pin in it and come back to it later when we're talking about working on the Motley record and stuff like that, and more of the fallout of things that happened and all that stuff, and using it as a bigger talking point for a way more serious issue.
But the thing of it is, and Paul was really great at helping convey this, but it's kind of how it happened. Do you know what I mean? Like the whole Uncle Jack thing happened, you have to remember, when I was, you know, 13, 14, 15 years old. And I had put a pin in it. Like it was done. It was like I wasn't even thinking about it. And then, you know, you move up 20 years, you know, at this point I've been playing the clubs. You know, he was a person that I didn't even think about. You know, dead and buried, whatever. And like, you know, so I had gone through my whole club phase. I had gone through a marriage with my wife. I had moved to LA. You know, and all through that time, my main thought was like, I just want to get a record deal. And then I did the Scream, and I toured for a while with that. And when we were doing the Motley record, my mom obviously had been diagnosed with cancer, and she just called me. She just called me on the phone and said, "Hey, I just want you to know." And then she told me again, and it literally brought all these angry, you know, just, I was honestly, I can't describe it. And I was fucking pissed when she called me and told me the story about him living with this family, the 2 boys, blah, blah, blah. And I literally remember like laying in bed pissed in Vancouver, Canada. I'm trying to do my record and I was fucking pissed all night. And, we used to ride in a van together back to the studio every day from the hotel. And I got in the van and everybody's like, oh man, hey, great. Everybody's talking like I slept like a baby. Oh, I went to the bar last night. I had some cocktails or whatever. And I just sat there, like, as I was sitting in bed all night, I was thinking about that riff that we had. It was very dark sounding and very evil sounding. And I went into when I got into the van, I told Tommy, Nikki, and Mick what had, transpired. And I said, that riff that we have that really kind of, we were calling it Evil D because it's in the key of D. And they're like, yeah, I said, and so I told them the whole story about my Uncle Jack. And initially we wanted to call the song The Ballad of Jack Hayes because that was his name. And so we just started writing the tune. We put lyrics to it. We told Bob Rock about it. He was like, awesome. And we did the song. And then we had the legal issue about mentioning him by name. We had to change it. So we just wound up calling it Uncle Jack. But it was just one of those, even reading this book, when I was rereading it, there were spots where I was just like, oh God, it's like
100%.
I had a fucking stomach ache again. You know what I mean? Like reading about going through some of the divorces and, my second ex-wife, all the bullshit I went through with her and then leaving some of the bands. Like I was kind of going through the whole thing with the lawsuit with Motley and I was literally getting a stomach ache and I'd have to put it down and go walk away for a minute and then go make myself a cup of tea or coffee and come back and continue to edit or do whatever. But it was also therapeutic because I kind of feel like, all right, I got it all out, got it out of my system, and here it is. This is what makes Corabi kind of tick. So
something, thinking about that record and thinking about that song specifically, especially when I kind of look back on it, having, being in 2022, thinking back to that then, outside of, Daddy by Korn on their first record, I feel like they came out roughly around the same time. And I mean, you guys are kind of both, you and Jonathan, coincidentally enough, are both talking about things that hadn't really been put to music, not so like direct. What was the reaction from either the label or people in general when they finally got to hear this song? Because I feel like it's one of those things where it made people feel seen. And as a result of you being the conduit for the lyrics to come out and the experiences that you had, even if they weren't yours necessarily firsthand, that I feel like a lot of people who went through that probably came to you and talked about their own experiences and probably would thank you, I would assume, for bringing this to light.
It's funny. Like the only people that I was really kind of concerned about at the time was my brothers and sisters, because it is awkward. And there's a lot of times, how many times do you hear things about, not to be dark or whatever, but how many times do you hear about a woman being raped and she doesn't tell anybody about it? You know what I mean? I think they're more embarrassed. So my concern was, we wanted to write the song, but I just sat down and I called my mother and I called my sister and my brother and my other sister. And I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. If you guys aren't comfortable with this, I'll change directions for this right now. But I just want to make sure you guys are cool with it. And all three of them, like hands down, they just said, nope, no, it happened. We can't change it. And I think it's fucking awesome that you're writing a song about it. I let them hear the song. And, now what we did do back when we were on tour, we said that we would take the proceeds to that song and donate it to any sort of, child abuse, any kids that were affected by, sexual misconduct or whatever. We said that we would donate that. And, but it's unfortunate because obviously the record didn't sell well and the tour didn't do well. So we didn't really make as much noise as we thought we would when it came out. You know what I mean? Now I have had over the last, 25 years, it's almost 30 now. I have had a few, again, the record didn't sell well, but I have had a few fans come up to me and say, wow, like, dude, like I went through the exact same thing. Like, that was awesome. Like you put the sentiments towards your Uncle Jack that I had like floating in my head towards the person that abused me. You know what I mean? So that was cool. I know, like, knowing that maybe my sentiment or my anger got through and I just threw it out there. It was therapeutic for somebody else to a degree. It made me feel good. But the only thing that bums me out is obviously the record didn't sell well and the tour didn't do well. So not that many people knew about it. And due to Motley's past, a lot of people thought we were talking about Jack Daniels. So it kind of went over a few people's heads what we were talking about.
I think it's just one of those things, and at the time, I'm like, let's see, that came out in like what, 94. So
March.
I would have. Yeah. So at that point I would have been like 10, but it's like, I remember
I would have been 60.
So it was one of those where, and that's the thing that's crazy about music sometimes is I've been kind of working my way through this thought of like how music can change and grow with you based on the experiences that you've accumulated. And it's interesting, as I've listened to that Motley Crue record that you were a part of, having it blasted in my house, from my parents and so forth, and kind of finding it myself over the years and kind of going back and re-listening to it. And a lot of music, it's interesting how it just changes. And, that was one that obviously wasn't a single or anything like that, but it's one to me when I heard it, it always stuck out to me, especially I think it's like what, track 3 or something like that. It's right in the front of the record. So to kind of hit it, right away, it was one of those where I was like, this seems and felt like it was a very important song. That's why it is where it exists on the record to me. And it's just, like I said, thinking back, 94, people weren't talking about things like that. And so just kind of wondering, what was it like and what was the reaction to that song when people finally heard it? Or did it kind of just cause more people to kind of be like, oh, that's a little too serious for me and my rock and roll,
Well, the record label did hear the song and they thought it was great. Again, though, the perfect storm. I think I tell you, I say something in the book about everybody at the label being fired.
Yeah.
When they first heard the record, the president of the label, Bob Krasnow, he was like, holy shit, guys, this fucking record is just, it's so musical. It's fucking brilliant. And he was going on and on and on. Unfortunately, like a week after our record came out, he wasn't there anymore. Now, their only concern about the record was that when we turned the I guess the term tapes, When we turned the tapes into the label, the song was called The Ballad of Jack Hayes. And they were like, we love the song, but we got to change the title. We got to pull the title. They were afraid of a lawsuit. They were afraid that me naming him publicly would create a lawsuit. And we fought them for a while, but we said, all right, fine. Let's just call it Uncle Jack. But again, I think the label knew, management knew, the band knew, everybody was really into it. But it was weird. Like I remember when it first came out, a lot of fans thought we were talking about drinking Uncle Jack, like Uncle Jack Daniels. And then it started to catch on when they really listened to the lyrics, that it was about a child molester that I just unfortunately happened to be related to.
You kind of poke fun at it toward the end of the book, about how I put out music and it doesn't seem to resonate with people in the immediate, but it does well after the fact. Reading that, and
it's the truth. I mean, one of the things, hence the name of the book. I realized after reading the book, 8 or 10 more times, that it's like looking at the glass half empty, half full. If I look at it half full, I'm very blessed at the fact that I'm still here 30 plus years later, still making music, still doing my thing. I'm still touring. I have a good life. I'm healthy. I have a beautiful home, like all these things. So like I look at it that way.
Yeah.
But if I look at it half empty, I've realized that I have been the king of always being at the right place at the wrong time. I've had quite a few fans even ask me, like, why were you in so many bands? They look at me, they think, well, maybe he's difficult. Maybe he's hard to work with. Maybe he's, you know what I mean? And it's just, honestly, it's just the deck that I was dealt. Like, I look at life like a poker hand. Each band, I wish I was sitting here right now talking to you about the 15th or 16th Scream record. But, it's just a set of circumstances. And each one of those circumstances, I look at it like a poker hand. Not the whole game, just the hand. And when I was in the Scream, that was my hand. I played it. We were kicking ass. It looked like we were going to win the pot. And then Motley called. Okay. And I folded and I started a new hand. And, like, who knew I was going to get that call? Who knew that Vince was going to come back? Who knew that Union would be put together and a lot of your radio people and magazines and promoters would look at me and Bruce Kulick like a couple old bulls that should be put out to pasture. So it's just the hands that I was dealt. But, I've played it. I played everything the best that I could. I'm still trying to do, like, I still don't feel like, I was just telling somebody a couple weeks ago, I said, if you went to a party and told everybody at the party that you were going to see Steven Tyler at a club that night, everybody probably 90% of the people in the party, or all of them, would go, oh, I love Steven Tyler. But if you walked into the same party and said, hey, I'm going to go see John Corabi tonight at a club, probably 80% of them would cock their head and go, why does that name sound familiar? I've just been that guy. So after reading this thing, Paul and, the publishing company are like, what do you want to call this? And I go, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades. Because I have been close. I'm still not a household name. I've been close. and or I've been the king of being at the right place, but always at the wrong time. And that's why we use that name, which oddly enough came from my dad, right before he passed away. So
I'm going to take just a second. My wife is texting me. We have our power went out the other day, and then our AC went down last night, and it's been like 100 plus the last couple of days. So I'm going to text her that our person just called me and is coming.
That's funny. I just got a text that said severe thunderstorms, hail, and possible tornado.
Yeah, that was also kind of the funny thing going through some of your socials, and because I believe, obviously you live in Tennessee now, and it's funny that you posted like the snowstorm, and I had commented, you're like, oh, in Tennessee on this day, and then it could be 100 degrees, and I was like, welcome to Michigan as well, where literally you can experience all 4 seasons in one day in about an hour and a half sometimes.
Yeah, it was crazy. Those snowstorm pictures I did, I shit you not, it was literally like 64 degrees earlier that day. Yeah. I was outside in a t-shirt, and I came in. I had done some recording, and I had a little home studio, and I was doing some recording, and I was in there for quite a few hours. And I came out, I called it a night, packed up the studio, sitting there watching a movie, and my dog went outside. I have a little doggy door they can go out and use for the bathroom. And my dog went outside and came back in. It was all wet, and I'm like, oh fuck, is it raining? And I opened up the window and I looked down. It was just snow, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening right now? So yeah, I'm like, oh, I gotta take a photo of this and post it. Great. I just experienced spring and winter in the same day.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it was so funny because I feel like a lot of your book, when I'm reading it, I was like, you're like the Forrest Gump of rock and roll, like just always seemingly having these interesting experiences happen to you. But it was really weird because at times certain things were kind of like, you talked about, coincidentally, as I'm wearing the shirt today, the Red Door Saloon. When we travel, my wife and I typically will ask people, like, we'll go to a bar and then we'll go like ask that person, where do you go? Because we want to experience as much of the actual local flavor when we go somewhere versus the touristy shit.
Right.
And so when we went, someone's like, oh, you have to go to Red Door. And we're like, all right, well, it happens to be near the Airbnb we're staying at. So like within walking distance, sounds great. Proceeded to go there every single day. And it's one of those that the weird part was when I was in it, I was like, this feels like not saying Tennessee's not super close to the Midwest, but it's like, it felt like a Midwest bar because of all the Chicago Cubs shit in it. And I was like, I feel like I'm not far from home, but also why the Cubs?
Well, I'll tell you why. The owner is from Chicago.
Yeah.
So like everything Chicago, but it's weird. I have a buddy, a very good friend of mine, David Stonich. He's from Joliet. And he lives here. And then my tattoo guy, this guy, Adam, I can't even say his last name. I just call him the Kid. He works at a tattoo place here called Custom Brills. He's from Chicago. And so now which Red Door did you go to? The Midtown one, like near Music Row?
Yes. I believe
okay. So. See, there's another one in
East, I believe.
In East Nashville. And that's where we would all go. And now right down the street from there's another place called Beyond the Edge, which is a bar as well. And on Sundays, they have every football game, the early ones, the late ones, then the Sunday night one, Monday night one, Thursday night, whatever. It's always on. And there's so many Bears fans that their back room, they have a huge back room with a bar in it and a couple of pool tables and all this stuff. Well, every Sunday they pull the pool tables out. They set up a bunch of tables, and then they have one of those glass, almost like garage door type looking thing. They open that up, and they call it the Bear Cave. And any given Sunday, there will literally be 100 Bears fans in there, drinking, you know, whatever. And they've got their funny rituals. Like every time Jay Cutler would throw an interception, they would, the main guy that like kind of put it all together, he would literally buy everybody in the room a shot of Jaeger. You know, so it was just like this whole thing. And I wound up becoming friends with a bunch of those guys. And, and I got to be honest with you, I'm originally from Philadelphia, an Eagles fan, but I would just half the time I would go sit in there just for the humor of watching them go through their shit, you know. But and then it was funny, I got a couple of them like David Stonich, Adam. I bought a few of them a t-shirt that I saw, and it's a picture of Jay Cutler on the front with he's holding a gun to his own head, and it says $20 he'll miss. I bought them all these t-shirts, and you know, so I'm kind of like an honorary Bear Cave member. But it's pretty awesome. If you ever get back down here again, you got to go on a Sunday to Beyond the Edge, and just, it's diversity. But they have, you know, bar food, drinks, all this other kind of stuff. And it's fucking hilarious. It's such a blast every Sunday. It's pretty cool.
Well, it's funny because like, I know they have it at least at the Red Door. Malort has been getting around now that they have distribution to go outside of Chicago. For those that don't know what Malort is, it is like an herbal liqueur. It tastes pretty garbagey. Half of the fun is having someone who's never had it try it and then go, what does it taste like? And then they usually will say things like someone goes, you ever like accidentally drank like a beverage that has like cigarette butts put into it? It tastes like that, but it's been sitting out for like 6 days. Like the explanations that people give are things that clearly they've never had, or exaggerated to the point where you're like, you don't even know what that is, but okay. But when we were there, I had made the comment. Good.
It's a cross somewhere between assholes and onions.
It's become a point of pride. Like the bar I work at, we sell it, and we did the first Michigan party, like event thing for Malort, and it went really well. But that was our hook, is that we would, you know, get people to drink it, and then we would film them and then tag Malort. And then so they realized that we were pushing their product. But when I was at the Red Door, I was like, you know what, fuck it. I feel like I'm in Chicago. Give me a shot of Malort in an old style. And they're like, you really want Malort? And I was like, yeah. And everyone was waiting for me to make the face. And I was just like, all right. And just kept going. They're like, really? You can just do that? I go, I've had enough of it now that it really doesn't have much of a reaction to me. It is what it is.
That's funny. I'll have to try it. I've never had it before. I didn't even know what it was until you mentioned it. So I'll have to.
The flavor definitely lingers. I'll pre-warn you with that. There's not really anything you can do to it to make it go away. You just kind of have to suffer through it.
Nice.
But to me, when you said that you were the bear at the Bear Cave, and every time Jay Cutler would throw an interception, I was like, oh, I bet Shots Malort went out.
I've been married 3 times, so nothing scares me. I can do it.
Honestly, that was something that was really interesting to me about the book. And just, I mean, it's kind of your character trait, I think, as a whole, is just, you're a no bullshit person. But even getting as real as you did, especially your second marriage, I was just like, holy shit. I didn't see all of what you were going through coming. But it was one of those that even like, as you said, the hand you've been dealt, whether you folded on that hand and wanted for another one, the fact that it seems like nothing really ever deters you from playing the game in and of itself. Like that you're just always like, okay, like now how do I deal with this? What happens now?
And that was the thing, like, if you remember in the beginning of this conversation, I told you my manager was laughing at me. And like, okay, bear with me for a minute. I'm going to zigzag all through this conversation. But one of the things that I've had people say about me is that I'm personable or like I'm not like an over the top you know, rock guy. I hate to use the term rock star, but rock whatever. And I kind of credit that to the fact that, you know, if you go back and read the book, or you've obviously read it, I was married at a very young age to a woman who already had a kid. But all through my life, it seemed like, and I was just telling somebody this the other day, it seemed like every time something really fucking amazing would happen to me, something really crazy on the flip side would happen right at the same time. So, for example, you know, I was so stoked when I got the Scream thing. We did the record, we went on tour, and literally the night or the next day that I left to go on tour, my son was diagnosed with diabetes, and he was in Cedars-Sinai Hospital for 10 days on, like, in ICU.
Yeah.
So, okay, then we get through that, you know, we got through that little situation. And then when I got the Motley gig, just literally prior to that, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And then I get this Motley gig. So I've always had this thing of kind of checks and balances. Again, you know, I had no idea that things were going to end with my first wife the way they did. We're still great friends. I mean, she lives here in Nashville. She moved here to be near my son and my two amazing identical twin granddaughters.
That was a funny joke you put in the book about that.
Yeah, but you know, it's like they, you know, she came here, we're friends, and a few times she's come here, she actually stayed with me and my current wife. So we're all good. The second one, you know, I don't know what I was thinking. And I think I say that in the book, like, I was just in a weird spot mentally. I can't say I hate her or anything like that. It was just, she was in a weird spot. I was in a weird spot. We were doing weird shit. And once again, I got married. I had been living with the girl for a few years, and she was nothing but stellar. And then all of a sudden, she just went fucking ape shit, like, you know, whatever. So again, that I didn't see that coming either. Like, as shocked as you were to read it, I was that shocked. I was that shocked going through it. But again, I've always had these checks and balances through my life where I've kind of kept myself pretty level. It's really funny. Like, every time something awesome happens to me, I can feel myself almost tensing up. Like, okay, what's going to follow this up? You know, I just won 80 million in the lotto. Something's going to happen to check me out on this one. So it's just the way my cards I was dealt. So, but the other thing is, I'm not ashamed of anything. You know, I've maybe done more than your average factory worker, maybe not as much as Tommy Lee or Nikki Sixx, but you know, I've had some fun, I've had some ups, I've had some downs, and not all of them were in bed. Unless you're talking about my second ex-wife, and all the ups and downs in that relationship were definitely in bed.
The thing, you possibly will have seen it in those that are listening. If you go back and watch the video version of this, you'll see me have the kind of thought. You know, I didn't think of it until you kind of were just talking and thinking about the book itself, but, you know, kind of thinking in a bigger sense. It seems that if you want to talk about kind of I don't want to say a god, but like, it seems like maybe you have been put onto this earth to kind of help people who need a good person or a good guiding person in their life at the time. I mean, thinking about your first wife, talking about, you know, the experiences that you both went through when you just were kind of dating, to thinking about even your professional career with like Motley, you kind of come in when people are kind of at their lowest and really need that person that believes in them to be a supporter of them.
You know, and I was just telling somebody this again the other day, like just a friend, you know, I said, you know, it's funny, like even the girls that I've dated through the years, I've never been the type of guy to get together with my guy friends and let's go to a bar, let's go, you know, let's go out looking for chicks or whatever. I've never been that guy. I find it a little awkward to talk to women in the beginning. But for some reason, you know, I thought about that too. You're kind of right. It just seems like I meet these women. It's like the sky just opens up and drops these chicks in my life and says, okay, she's gone through a transition period. We need you. We need you to help her get through it. And, you know, it's funny. I've never actively pursued anybody as far as these girls. Somehow one thing goes to, it's like starts with a conversation, and then it's like the next thing I know, I'm like, you know, I'm rolling around in the backseat of a Chevy Nova, you know what I mean? And I'm like, what? How the fuck did this happen? But it has been funny, like, and Paul and I was just in Australia a couple weeks ago, and Paul and I were talking about it, and I said, man, it's so weird. Like I've kind of been like a transition guy for everybody. Even if you think about it, even Motley, like I did, you know, technically 3 records with them, but I think I was just some guy that helped them transition through the grunge era. And then move back on to Vince again and work things out. So I don't know what the deal is, if you believe in it. I do joke around with people. They're like, you know, Crab, you're a god. And I'm like, well, I do have the initials, JC.
It's one of those that I think when you are able to, like, I mean, because a lot of reading the book felt like a lot of things that I am like, that happens to me, like, you know, spoilers, I guess, sort of, but like the thing you talked about with after your dad had passed and you were working on the car, and, you know, all of the things that you went through to restore it and kind of do all these things just to have it blow up shortly after you got it. And it's like that you literally got out of the car and like, boom, then it happens. And it's like, you know, when I read that, I was like, I feel like things like that have happened to me where I work towards something or I spend all this time on something and then literally it just, something happens and it's gone. And you just kind of are like, fuck. And you feel this loss because you're like, okay, like I put a lot of time and effort and energy into this thing and it's gone.
Yes.
But then the thing that you kind of have to think about, and not so much maybe in a life or death situation like that one would have been, but it's not always about the end result. It was kind of the journey that all of those things took you on and what you learned along the way. That then is kind of the ultimate reward, I guess, at the end.
And to be honest with you, that was truly that was a rough week. You know, we were starting to hear about COVID. A tornado went through Nashville and just leveled a bunch of places. Even in East Nashville, there was a place where I recorded my Live 94 record, The Basement East, and I just did a video for my new song, Casi Bella. And that was leveled. I spoke with the owner, this guy Mike Grimes, and they literally had to lock themselves in a beer cooler and ride that whole thing out. It leveled the entire building. So we literally had the tornado the night before. And I was getting ready to leave to go do some shows. And I pulled the car in. Now, the funny thing is my neighbor across the street saw me start the car, saw me back it out, and then I backed it out of my driveway, turned it around, and then backed it into my yard. And he was riding his, he's got a riding lawnmower, and he heard a pop, and he just happened to look up, and he saw the entire, not even just under the hood, literally from the front to the back of the car was engulfed in, it was like a ball of flames. And he freaked out because he never saw me get out of the car.
Oh, shit.
So he ran across the thing. And again, my wife was on the phone with somebody. And somebody started pounding on the door. She went to the door and he's yelling, "I think John's in the car and it's on fire." So she came and saw the thing and she started screaming. And at this point, I just came out of the bathroom. I go, "What's all the commotion about?" And they're like, "God, your car's on fire." And that's, but it was just like, I think one of the things that I wanted to get across in the book was the importance of, and I without being preachy and without just being weird, life to me is just a sequence of there's ups and downs, like I said earlier, but you're going to have setbacks. You're going to have a sequence of setbacks all through your life. And it's about whether or not you can get through them and retain sanity. And my wife kind of still gets mad at me. And I don't want to say mad, but she's like, "Oh my God, you totally look through rose-colored glasses when it comes to life." And I go, I kind of have to. That's just my thing. I'm still that guy that's as bummed as I was about the car. I was more bummed at the fact that it was my dad's car, not the money that I put into it. It was my dad's car. But I'm like, fuck, okay, it's lost. It's done. I dealt with the insurance company and now I got myself another new little car. You know what I mean? It's fine. But, if you let this shit get to you where it just ruins your day or ruins your life or whatever, then you're failing, So yeah. I tend to look at life, even on a setback or something happens, and I just sit there and go, okay, I just remind myself, all right, well, that didn't happen. The universe has a different plan than what I thought. And something's going to pay off. Something's going to happen. And, that's just kind of how I look at life. It may sound spiritual. It may sound like, Woodstock hippie-ish, whatever. But maybe it's because of the setbacks I've had, but I just look at life and I like everything that I'm doing is the thing that's going to take me over that thing and make me a household name. Each song that I do, I think is the greatest song that I've ever written. And this is going to be the one that's going to push me over that limit and make me a household name. So I always try to look at the positives of things. Even now during this COVID thing, it was extremely rough for myself as a musician who couldn't do anything for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But even my wife is owns a hair salon, and COVID crushed her business. But she sits there and she's like, she panics. She tends to think this way. And I just sit there and I go, you know what? It was really rough. We're up to our eyeballs in debt right now, credit card debt and all this other shit. But at the end of the day, we didn't lose our house. We didn't lose your business. Like, she owns the property in East Nashville. I go, you didn't lose that. We didn't lose our house. We still have our health. And things now are starting to pick up, which means we'll get right back to where we were. Maybe take us a little bit longer, little curve in the road, but we're going to be okay. Millions of people lost their homes, lost their businesses, lost everything. And I go, and lost their lives. Yeah. And I sit there and I go, well, okay, you know what? We're going to be all right. It may take me a little bit longer. Okay. I was planning on retiring when I was 96. I'll have to work until I'm 98, whatever.
Yeah. It sounds, that was the other thing to a lot of, how you met your current wife, and a lot of like the relationship between you two felt very akin to the one that I've had with my wife. Like, I joke all the time, when people say, a lot of our friends are like, we want a relationship like yours. And I'm like, well, I mean, what does that mean to you? What does it look like? And I go, because I guarantee, watch this. And I go, I'll ask my wife, I'm like, Bridget, did you ever think you were going to be married to someone like me? And she goes, oh, no. And, I'll kind of do the same. I'm like, oh, I totally didn't see the same thing. Like, same thing. I didn't expect us to be who we ended up with. I go, but, we knew, we both kind of came out of bad relationships that we had been in for a while. We knew what we were looking for. And it just kind of, we serendipitously, because the other irony is everyone always goes, you're never going to find someone at a bar. And then they'll be like, well, where'd you guys meet? At a bar. So it's one of those where, I think people have this idea of what life is supposed to be like, or what the perfect marriage or perfect relationship is supposed to be like. And I think it's, and like life, I think it's a lot of balances. And I love the fact that my wife is not like me. It's sometimes challenging because I'm more like you, where I'm like, this sucks now. Something, it won't be like this forever, but these are the things that will help you toughen up and get the experience you need to get through the next hardship whenever that comes.
Yeah, and it's weird. That's the beauty. I think the beautiful part of life. It's, you don't know what's going to happen next. Whatever. And so, I mean, it's funny, not to sound weird, but I was getting ready to say earlier, and I kind of, like I said, I zigzagged through that whole conversation. I guess the thing, like Paul, when we sat down and started writing the book, he said, what is it that you're trying to let people know about you? And I said, most people look at musicians in a different light. They're kind of above the fray. You know what I mean? For most people, they're like, oh, these, rock guys or rock stars or whatever you want to call musicians. And I think people forget that, the Steven Tylers and the Nikki Sixxes and the Robert Plants and Mick Jaggers. Well, guess what, folks? They all get their heart broken too. They all take their pants off to take a shit. So what I wanted to portray was, we're all human. I'm no different than the next guy. So the reason why I was blunt and honest about my relationships, and I hope I portrayed it, was to see how bummed out and crushed I was when they didn't work out.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I wanted to portray was, again, it might not be a behind the scenes, VH1 behind the scenes type book, but I have had to overcome a lot of shit all through my whole life. So it's about perseverances too, not letting the negative things happen. And there's been times in my life where I was fucking penniless, even after the Motley thing. I was penniless and I was panicked, and I'm like, oh my God, like my bills are due at the end of the month. Like, how the fuck am I going to do this? And somehow, some way, the universe always gave me what I needed to help me get through, even if it was in chunks. Like, I might have needed $6,000 to pay my bills, and I got 3, and then 10 days later, another 3 or 4. And I was able to get through the shitstorm.
Yeah.
So it's just about, like, just keeping your chin up and just, and I think that's why we use the quote in the beginning of the book, from the, not to sound cheesy, the Rocky movie. When I saw that movie and Paul saw it, we were like, you know what? That's probably one of the most brilliant life comments you'll ever hear. And so we're like, we gotta put this in the book. We have to put this in the book. So that was basically what I was trying to portray, is I'm human, and persevere, man. Just keep fucking fighting. It's not about getting knocked down. It's about how many times you can get back up and keep moving forward.
100%. I would love to keep talking to you more, but I have to go deal with this air conditioning thing. The tech is here. I'll end with this though. So when I started this podcast about 5.5, almost 6 years ago, I had put together a list of people that I wanted to have on. And my list wasn't normal. It wasn't like I want to get, the biggest person ever. It was people who meant something to me and kind of had this intangible, as I've realized looking back, of the intangible thing of surviving and overcoming things and being able to still, maybe they're not the biggest person ever, but they mean something to me. And I know that they mean something to so many other people with the music they put out or just who they are as people. You were on my initial bucket list of people I wanted to get. And it's funny, this podcast has taught me that things will happen when they're supposed to. I had tried to reach out to get you before and didn't even get an acknowledgement back. And when I saw...
Did you write to me or somebody else?
It was someone that I think was handling your publicity at the time.
Okay.
But it was one of those where I had heard you were putting out the book, saw it was through Rarebird, and had a connect with them through someone I was supposed to get before. And I sent out a thing to the person that was handling your stuff. And I was like, I would love to have John on. I feel like this is when it's supposed to happen. And they were like, your podcast would be a great one because it kind of like not many people want to read first and foremost, and are this far ahead of before the book's even done. So I had to wait about probably 7 or 8 months for this to happen. But it was one of those where I feel like the experiences I've gone through of traveling to Tennessee in the last couple of months and getting a lot of, like I said, thinking a lot more about some of the stuff you've gone through and reading the book and feeling more of a connection to you, I feel like made this better than it would have been if I would have been able to have gotten you years ago. So thank you for the time. And I would love to have you back on to just bullshit again, or even if we don't do another one of these, if I'm either back in Nashville or you're around here in Michigan, would love to meet up and share a drink and just bullshit.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you for having me. And go deal with your air conditioning. if you're dealing with the weather that we're dealing with, man, it's like 95 degrees. and humid. So
Yeah, it was about 87 when I took my dog for a walk at 7 o'clock this morning. So
it's been ugly, but I appreciate the support, and I'm just glad. Hopefully, you did enjoy the book, and I thank you.
lastly, where can anyone find you, or anything you would like to plug online or anything?
I'm John Corabi Official on Instagram. John Corabi Official, I think, on Facebook. I have a fan page, personal page. I'm on Twitter, crablegs59, and then I have www.johncorabi.com. So I'm
Awesome. I will have to actually get one of those signed books that you have on your site. I saw that the other day and was like, now that I've read it, I need to get one for the tangible collectible part of it, of having it to the rest of my book collection.
Well, I'm not totally sure, but I believe I'm coming up there in August.
Okay.
I'm doing some shows with Richie Kotzen.
Oh, okay.
In August. So if I'm near you and you have the book, just bring it and I'll sign it for you.
Awesome. 100%. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you at some point.
Awesome, boss. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So that was my conversation with John Corabi. Again, want to thank him for taking the time to chat. Again, go pick up Horseshoes and Hand Grenades. You can go to johncorabi.com. You can go pick up the book there. You can go to rarebirdlit, I believe is what it is, .com, and go pick up a copy there. Definitely go pick up this book. Like I said, I love reading in general. I love reading band biographies, and this was one that I've been looking forward to for a while, and I flew through it in about a day. It's a very quick read to me. I know everyone reads at a different level, but it's a very quick read. It's a very personal read, and at times, I think that's one of the more commendable things about it to me, is how vulnerable John is in it. It doesn't paint him sometimes in the best lights. Other people, the events that happened to him, but kind of like I said, and like he joked, that's kind of a great way to approach life, though, where it's like, yeah, sometimes I was the asshole. Sometimes I did do these things. The narrative of that book could have been, I got fucked almost my whole life. Woe is me. But it's not. It never is that. It never ventures into that. And it's one of those, for me, as someone who has a lot of my own life tendencies to kind of be similar, where it's like, okay, I left this and now I don't know what the fuck's going on. I know I did what was right for me personally, but now what? And then I'll be damned if something doesn't fucking pan out. And it just kind of is one of those things where it's like, it may not be what you want or how you think it's going to be, life that is. But if you just kind of trust in yourself and realize to take chances and kind of take some risks along the way, that things will kind of pan out the way they're supposed to. And interestingly enough, of me recording this episode, the intro and outro for this now, it's so funny because I was actually reminded of this same thing that I was just talking about when hanging with Ken from On Earth, who was filling in for As Lay Dying this last on the tour they're doing. But they were in town the last couple of days. He and I got to hang out and talk face-to-face for the first time in a little while. And it was one of those where, I'm not going to go into any specifics of what we were talking about because a lot of it just, doesn't need to be shared. But it's one of those where I'm reminded that, I guess let me back up slightly. I was reminded that not being an asshole and not trying to just do something for the sake of a quick headline or trying to rush to someone to do spill the beans on something, that actually gets you further along in life than most people who are out to do those things and be very selfish with the information they have. And I don't know if it's my age, I don't know what it is, but something I'll say, and I'm sure John would very much back this sentiment. Your self-worth is really only as valuable as your word is. If people can't trust you, if you tell people you're going to do something, or if you're going to keep a secret of some sort, if you don't, people will know they can't trust you, and that that's what good are you? What value do you have? And I was reminded of that in talking to Ken about a lot of things, And I also was reminded as I kind of am leaving some other things and just some things are kind of up in the air. You know, I'm quitting my bar job for a multitude of reasons, but it was kind of funny because somehow, you know, we got talking about some other work opportunities, and potentially there's something on the horizon that Ken and I might be able to work out and work on together. And I'll divulge more of that when and if it comes to fruition. But like I said, it was one of those, that was a night, much like, you know, John's book, where I just kind of was reminded that sometimes things just fall into place and you just need to have a little bit of trust in yourself and the relationships that you nurture and harbor, and that sometimes life will just kind of show you things. You just kind of need to follow it. Sorry to get all spacey and weird. Maybe I'll divulge a little bit more about that too over the. Actually, I already have. Go back and listen to the John LaMacchia episode where I had, you know, talked about getting my cards read. I've talked about going to therapy and what that's done, you know, and just how that's revealed a lot of things. So, I guess in short, don't be afraid to challenge yourself and challenge and find who you are. I think self-exploration is always a good thing. I think it's how we learn. I think it's how we grow. So kind of in wrapping all of this up, if you would like to keep up with John, it's simple enough. You can go to johncorabi.com. It'll be the landing page for everything. Refer to the show notes for all the socials where he is, but if you don't want to check that out, Facebook is John Corabi Music, Instagram is John Corabi Official, and Twitter, which is probably my favorite one, is Crablegs59. I think that's very clever. I want to thank the podcast sponsors for continually supporting the podcast. If you can support them, please do. Rockabilia.com, use our code BREWtally at checkout and take 10% off your order. The Bean Bastard, go to thebeanbastard.com, see the variety of options they have for coffee, soaps, and so much more over there. If you live in the Buffalo, New York area, go to the brick and mortar store, support them. And last but not least, On Point Pomade. Go to onpointpomade.com, use our code BSP15, and take 15% off your total purchase order at the end there. And for the podcast itself, just find us, Brutally Speaking Podcasts, Brew Speak Pod. If you can rate, review, subscribe, do that if you would like to. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/brewspeakpod. Support that if you would like to monetarily. All of it goes back into supporting and funding a lot of the podcast things. If you want to reach out to me in general, guest suggestions, whatever, you can email me at brutallyspeaking@gmail.com. And for the Brutally Speaking podcast, I am John. I'm going to take a shot of this Jack Daniels I got in a cup. If you're watching on Patreon, the making of the intros and outros, you'll see me do this real quick. So thanks again to John. It felt apropos to do Jack Daniels. If you know anything about Motley Crue, you know that is their drink of choice, or was. So until next week, I will talk to you all then. Our guests, plural, are Davey Gross and Haley Kramer of Pop Evil. That was a really fun one. I've not gotten to meet Haley or talk to her. Dave is a regular at our bar, so I see him when he's not on tour at least a couple of times a week. We usually bullshit, so that was a fun chat with the two of them leading up to the beginning of their Vortex tour, which kicked off here in town. Unfortunately, I had to work at the bar, so I didn't get to go see the show, but I was at the Anchor Bar for plenty of the after show shenanigans. So looking forward to getting that one out to you. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll talk to you then.